Long ago, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests, where the spirits of ancestors whispered through the leaves, there lived a girl named Nolwandle. Her name meant beautiful one, and indeed, she lived up to it. She was the daughter of Mamthembu, a widow whose husband had perished in a hunting accident, leaving behind nothing but memories, a crumbling hut with walls of dried mud, and a small patch of cassava plants that struggled to grow in the hard earth. Life carved deep lines into Mamthembu's face, but Nolwandle's beauty seemed to defy their circumstances. Her skin glowed like river clay kissed by morning rain. Her eyes sparkled like stars reflected in still water. And when she laughed, which she did often, despite everything, the sound danced across the fields like bird song, causing even the oldest grandfathers to smile and remember their youth. The young men of the village and beyond took notice. Hunters arrived with offerings of fresh meat, their spears polished and their pride evident. Farmers came bearing sorghum and mealies, speaking of fertile lands they would one day inherit. Even sons of neighboring chiefs rode in on painted horses, their entourages glittering with brass ornaments and colorful beads, seeking audience with the beautiful Nolwandle. But each time, Mamthembu would bow her head in shame and reply with the same words that cut her heart like thorns. Honorable ones, a poor widow cannot dream beyond her station. We have no cattle to offer, no fields to share, no dowry to give. My daughter's fate rests not in our hands, but wherever the ancestors guide her footsteps. The suitors would leave, some with pity in their eyes, others with scorn, and Mamthembu would watch her daughter's face dim a little more each time, like a flame slowly starved of oil. As the seasons turned and Nolwandle blossomed into full womanhood, her 18th year approaching like storm clouds on the horizon, the family's poverty only deepened. The cassava harvest failed 2 years running. Their goat died of sickness. The thatch on their roof grew thin, letting in both rain and the whispered judgments of neighbors. The village women began to murmur at the river as they washed clothes. How can such beauty bring no fortune? Perhaps the girl is cursed. Perhaps the ancestors are displeased. These whispers reached the ears of the village elders, who called for Mamthembu one scorching afternoon when the sun hung merciless in the sky. "Woman," spoke Elder Mzimba, his voice carrying the weight of years and authority, "your daughter has seen 18 summers. She is ripe for marriage, yet she remains in your hut, like fruit, left too long on the branch. We cannot stand by and watch beauty waste away while poverty grows deeper. A decision must be made." The elders had already chosen a husband, a young man named Kagiso, whose name meant peace, though peace seemed far from his circumstances. His hut stood at the village's edge, smaller even than Mamthembu's, its walls cracked and patched with whatever materials he could scavenge. His clothes were a patchwork of tears mended with thorns and plant fibers, his sandals worn so thin that his feet bore permanent scars from stones. He survived by taking whatever work the more fortunate would offer, carrying water, clearing fields, mending fences, and was known to sleep on a bed of reeds with only a thin blanket woven from wild grass. When the villagers learned of the arrangement, their laughter rang harsh and mocking. Beauty married to beggary. The ancestors must be laughing at such a jest. Nolwandle wept when her mother brought the news, her tears falling like rain on parched earth. "Mama, why must I marry a man who owns nothing? Who can offer me nothing? I would rather remain unmarried and tend to you in your old age." Mamthembu gathered her daughter in arms, grown thin from years of hardship, her own tears flowing freely. "My precious child, My heart breaks like pottery dropped on stone. But poverty chains us to choices we would never make if we were free. Sometimes the river does not flow where we wish. It flows where the land bends, and we must follow where it leads, trusting that it knows a path we cannot see. And so, on a day when no birds sang and the very air seemed heavy with sorrow, Nolwandle was wed to Kagiso. The ceremony was as poor as they were. No drums thundered joyfully, no dancers celebrated with painted faces, no feast awaited the guests. Only a single calabash of thin sorghum beer was shared between the two families, and a few village elders bore witness to vows spoken in voices barely above whispers. As Nolwandle crossed the threshold into Kagiso's tiny hut, ducking beneath the low door frame, she felt as though she was entering a tomb where her dreams would lie buried forever. But the spirits weave patterns more intricate than any human eye can discern. Kagiso proved to be a man of unexpected gentleness. He never raised his voice, never demanded what little food they had for himself alone, never complained about their shared poverty. Yet something mysterious surrounded him, like morning mist. Nolwandle began to notice strange things. His sleeping mat would be empty before the cock crowed, and when he returned as the sun painted the sky with first light, his feet would be covered with unfamiliar red dust, not the brown earth of their village. Sometimes she caught him staring at the distant mountains with eyes that held secrets, and once she found a single cowrie shell, worth a month's food, hidden beneath his sleeping mat, though he quickly explained it away as payment for odd work. Curiosity, that dangerous companion of intelligent women, began to gnaw at her heart like termites in wood. On a night when the full moon hung like a silver calabash in the star-drunk sky, Nolwandle pretended to sleep while watching Kagiso through barely opened eyes. When he rose silently and slipped from the hut like a shadow, she waited until his footsteps faded, then followed. Her bare feet made no sound on the forest floor as she tracked him deeper into the ancient woods, past trees so old they remembered the first rains, their bark scarred with the marks of countless seasons. Kagiso moved with surprising confidence through the darkness, as if the very trees were guiding his steps. Finally, he stopped before a magnificent baobab tree, its trunk so vast that 20 men holding hands could not encircle it. Nolwandle hid behind a termite mound, her heart beating like a trapped bird, as she watched Kagiso approach the ancient giant. He clapped his hands 3 times, the sound echoing strangely in the still air, and spoke words in a language she had never heard. Bula, sithandwa sam, open, my beloved friend. To Nolwandle's amazement, the massive trunk groaned and split like a calabash cracking open, revealing a passage that glowed with soft golden light, as if stars had been captured and tamed within. Kagiso stepped inside without hesitation, and Nolwandle, trembling like a leaf in storm wind but unable to resist, crept forward and peered into the impossible opening. What she saw stole her breath like a plunge into icy water. The hollow of the great tree had been transformed into a chamber, fit for kings. Ivory tusks gleamed like moonlight, carved into intricate patterns that seemed to move in the flickering light. Golden bracelets, thick as serpents, coiled around the room's edges. Strings of cowrie shells cascaded from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Cloths finer than anything she had ever imagined. Some shimmering like captured sunlight, others deep as midnight sky, hung from invisible supports. And there, in the center of this impossible treasure chamber, Kagiso was transforming. He shed his patched and tattered clothing like a snake shedding old skin, revealing beneath them robes of royal purple and gold that seemed to have been woven from dreams themselves. As he straightened, his entire bearing changed. His shoulders squared with natural authority, his back straightened with inherited pride, and his eyes, those same gentle eyes she had grown to know, now sparkled with the confidence of one born to rule. He settled upon a carved throne of ebony and ivory, and in that moment, Nolwandle saw him not as the poor man she had been forced to marry, but as what he truly was, a prince whose nobility ran deeper than any poverty could touch. A twig snapped beneath her foot. Kagiso's head turned sharply, and their eyes met across the glowing chamber. For a heartbeat that stretched like eternity, neither moved. Then slowly, recognition and something like relief crossed his features. "Nolwandle," he said softly, his voice carrying new depths she had never heard before. "So the ancestors have decided it is time for truth to walk between us." With infinite gentleness, Kagiso beckoned her into the chamber. As she stepped across the threshold, the golden light seemed to welcome her, warming her skin like summer sunshine. "My wife," he began, the word carrying weight it had never held before. "I am not the man the village believes me to be. I am not even the man I have pretended to be, though every moment of our marriage has been honest in all ways but this one secret." He told her then of his true heritage. He was Prince Kagiso of the kingdom of Nolwandle, son of the great King Thabo, who had ruled with wisdom for 40 years before the ancestors called him home. When the king died, his brothers, men whose hearts had been poisoned by jealousy like wells contaminated by bitter roots, had plotted to kill the rightful heir and divide the kingdom among themselves. A Sangoma, wise as the ancient mountains, came to me in a dream, Kagiso explained, his voice heavy with memory. She warned me that death walked behind me like a shadow and that I must become invisible to survive. "Dress yourself in poverty," she said, "for evil men seek gold and power, not beggars and dust. Hide among the common people until the time comes for truth to reclaim its throne." The Baobab tree, he explained, had been blessed by his ancestors' spirits. It served as both sanctuary and treasury, keeping his birthright safe while he waited in exile for the right moment to return. "I needed a wife who would love not a prince with golden promises, but a poor man with empty hands," he said, reaching out to touch her face with fingers that trembled slightly. "Someone whose heart could see worth that wealth cannot buy or poverty destroy." The choice standing in that impossible chamber, filled with treasures beyond imagination, Nolwandle felt the world reshaping itself around her like clay in a potter's hands. Everything she had believed about her fate, her marriage, her future, all of it crumbled and reformed into new patterns she was only beginning to understand. "You could have told me," she whispered. "You could have trusted me with this secret." "Could I?" he asked gently. "When you wept on our wedding night? When you spoke of dreams that had died? How could I know if your love was for me or for what I might give you? Now I know. You have stood beside me through shame and mockery, through poverty and scorn. Your heart chose me when I had nothing to offer but my true self, hidden beneath rags." From that night forward, their marriage became something entirely new. Each evening, they would visit the Baobab chamber, and each morning, Kagiso would return to his disguise. But now, Nolwandle understood the nobility in his humility, the strength in his gentleness. She began to see how he watched over their poor neighbors without them knowing, how food appeared mysteriously at hungry widows' doors, how sick children's parents found coins to pay for healing herbs. Her heart, once bitter as unripe fruit, sweetened with understanding and grew rich with admiration for this man who wore poverty like a crown while keeping his true crown hidden. The return 2 seasons later, when the dry winds carried dust and rumors from distant lands, messengers arrived in their humble village. They rode fine horses and wore the colors of Nolwandle, deep blue and gold like sky meeting earth. The villagers gathered around these strangers, eager for news and novelty. The messengers spoke of civil war in the great kingdom, of how the king's brothers had indeed destroyed each other in their greed and ambition, leaving the land crying out for its true prince to return and restore peace. When they asked for one called Kagiso, the villagers' laughter rang bitter and mocking. "You seek our village beggar, the man who patches his clothes with thorns? Surely you jest." But Nolwandle watched her husband's face transform. The time for hiding was over. Kagiso walked calmly to the ancient Baobab and struck its trunk 3 times with his staff. The great tree opened like a door, revealing treasures that gleamed like captured stars. As the villagers gasped and fell silent, he emerged dressed in royal robes that seemed to carry the very authority of heaven. "I am Prince Kagiso of Nolwandle," he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "I have lived among you in disguise, learning wisdom from poverty and finding treasure in unexpected places." Taking Nolwandle's hand, he raised it high and declared, "This woman, whom you pitied for marrying a poor man, stood beside me when I had nothing. She shall be my queen, and her wisdom born of hardship shall help me rule with justice." And so Nolwandle, once mocked as beauty wasted on poverty, became queen of Nolwandle. She ruled with compassion forged in suffering, ensuring that no widow went hungry, no orphan went unclaimed, and no person was judged by the clothes on their back rather than the character in their heart. The village that had scorned them became a place of pilgrimage, where the great Baobab still stands as a reminder that treasures often hide in the most unlikely places, and that the ancestors' wisdom unfolds in patterns too complex for mortal understanding. Elders still tell this story when the moon is full, and children gather to learn the old wisdom. Do not despise the poor, for some wear poverty as a disguise. Do not mock another's fate, for the ancestors weave threads we cannot see. And love that endures in darkness becomes light that illuminates kingdoms. Thus ends the tale of the poor village girl who was forced to marry a poor man, never knowing she was wedding a prince whose greatest treasure was a heart that chose love over wealth, truth over appearance, and wisdom over the glittering promises of power.